Hi guys, hope you're doing well. It's good to talk to you in this different way, but so we'll see how this goes. So today, this first video is for me to go over the first couple chapters of part 1 of 1984. Just to help you guys make sure that you're on the right track, that you're getting the answers correct, or if you're getting them wrong, you're correcting them and you're saying kind of what the right thing is. But before we do, I was super excited to see you guys on Friday because I got this new shirt. And it's 1984 related, so here it is. So I was super sad I couldn't wear it, so I figured I'd wear it today because it makes me happy. Alright, so bear with me. It's the first time we're doing this, so thank you for being patient. I'm just going to go through part 1, chapter 1 and 2 review worksheet. So this is the one that you guys hand wrote because I passed it out to you, and I'll be collecting this one when we get back to school. Alright, so let's take a look. Number 1. The clocks are striking 13. What does this tell us about the society in 1984? We talked about this one a little bit when we read, and a lot of you guys said that the clock striking 13 signifies that they use like military time because that's what the military does. So this tells us that the society that they live in is a very militaristic one, and so we're likely to see characteristics of that as we continue to read. It's very structured. The people do live in poverty. We see that when we hear Winston's descriptions of like his apartment, the apartment that Mrs. Parsons and her children live in, and just the general scarcity of resources and things like that. It's because a lot of them are rationing, and a lot of the resources are going to the wars that they're fighting. All right, so let me know if you have questions about that one. Number 2, it's asking us to discuss the message conveyed by Big Brother posters hanging in the apartment buildings. How would this message differ if the posters only hung in public places? Alright, so I'm hoping that you guys got something similar to what I'm about to say, but by having the posters hanging up in the apartment buildings, it's giving the citizens this idea that they're being watched all the time. Not just when they're like in a public place or anything like that, but even when they're in the so-called privacy of their own home, Big Brother has his eye on them. So government surveillance is extreme here since citizens are always being watched even when they get home. Sorry, if you see me looking down, it's because I'm reading off my laptop. I took notes as I was going through the book. Alright, the next one is, I think, probably one of the tougher questions that we're going to be looking at today and probably throughout the rest of the book. But it's the party's 3 slogans, which I have on my shirt. War is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. At this point, what do you guys think this means? I know we don't have a lot to go off on, but we'll hear more about them as we keep reading. But just to kind of make sure that we're clear here, war is peace. We know that since it's like a militaristic society, they're always at war with either Eurasia or East Asia. So by constantly being at war, it's the government doing its best to keep the peace at home. And that's kind of like the propaganda that they're preaching. Like, we're protecting you out there, that way we can be peaceful at home. And since they are at a war, the people at home have to put on a united front and become united, which means that amongst the citizens themselves, there's peace. The next one I think is probably the hardest one to look at. Freedom is slavery, because it's a really strong paradox. It contradicts each other quite severely. So when someone has absolute freedom, they become slaves to their own ideas and motivations. It's kind of like if you're so like super into something that you'll do whatever it takes to achieve that goal, which kind of makes you a slave to that. Instead of giving people freedom in their society, the government tells them what to do so they don't have to think for themselves. So in a sense, they're not slaves to their own mind or their own motivations, and they are free from themselves. I know that one I think is kind of weird to look at. The last one, though, for their slogans, I think is probably the easiest one for us to understand. This is ignorance is strength. So think of like the idea of like ignorance is bliss. When someone is ignorant, it gives them a sense of strength and invincibility. And it kind of goes with the idea that the more you know, the more you are aware of like dangers and risks in our society, which some people can make the argument that that makes you weak. Because not that you're necessarily afraid, but just you know that you're weaker because you're more aware. All right, if you guys have questions on those, let me know. Number 4, analyze why Winston is not certain of the exact date and how a lack of timekeeping reinforces the party's manipulation of history. Alright, so Winston's not sure of like when he was born. He kind of has an idea of how old he is, but there are really no historical records for the public to take a look at. So by keeping the date unknown and by keeping other dates unknown, it creates a lot of uncertainty for the citizens, which means that they have to place their trust in the party. So the party, whatever the party tells them is true because they don't really know anything better. All right, number 5. In his diary, Winston writes about this film that he watched. So it's asking you guys to generalize what the film says about the party, how it controls the population, and how it views its citizens. So the film shown was a piece of propaganda intended to create a sort of unified hatred towards foreigners. It mentions the refugees trying to seek asylum, but a lot of the people in the crowd cheered when those refugees were either shot or when they were bombed or hurt in some way. This kind of propaganda fuels hatred, fuels a common hatred and creates an intense sense of nationalism, which is kind of dangerous because it leads the people to support the party no matter what. They have this blind loyalty because of it. We do see this one woman protest the video, and Winston refers to her as a prole. And if you guys remember, before we started reading, I mentioned that proles were kind of the people that are like on the outside of society, on the fringes. So this also shows the class division in the society. We can connect this to the 2 minutes hate, which we'll talk about in just a couple questions. All right, number 6, summarize Winston's feelings about OBrien. So OBrien's this member of the inner party, and Winston feels kind of connected to him, and he's not really sure why. But he mentions that he has this kind of hope that OBrien is, and he says, like, not perfect in his political orthodoxy, meaning that he's not completely loyal to the party. He has some questions about it too. So this makes Winston want to talk to OBrien because he's kind of in the same boat. Now remember, Winston doesn't really have anything to go off of that OBrien is against the party. He just has this like little feeling. Number 7, when he's talking about OBrien, Winston also mentions this dark-haired girl in the office, and he has a very different feeling towards her. So Winston admires OBrien while hating the girl. And I want you guys to think of, Winston kind of gives some reasons as to why he hates the girl. So think about why Winston and other people, specifically men, think of women in the society as dangerous. If you guys take a look on page 16, he goes into more details to why he hates her when he transfers his hatred from Goldstein to the girl. He hates her because he can't have her, essentially, which is really speaking to the misogynistic nature in the society and why it's dangerous for a man to have those beliefs. All right, so number 8. Now we're getting into the 2 minutes hate and its purpose. So the 2 minute hate is another propaganda tool that the government uses to keep its citizens loyal to Big Brother. During this time, we see the enemy. His name is Goldstein. He's going to be a really important figure for you guys to remember throughout the novel. So he's portrayed on the screen, and everyone's like screaming, shouting, yelling at him. Some people are like spitting, and they're just getting like really riled up about Goldstein. While they're yelling at Goldstein, the guy that's portrayed on the video, he's talking about like all the things that Goldstein preaches, which is stuff that we would like to see, like freedom of speech, freedom of information, that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to note that the people in that society are so conditioned against that stuff that they hate a man that would bring that up. It's also interesting to note that they make Goldstein appear kind of like a sheep, so like a very weak creature, because they make him sound like he's bleeding, not like he got a cut, but like bleating, like he's kind of talking like a sheep in a sense. He's sounding like a sheep, so he comes off as weak. Winston also mentions that it's impossible to avoid joining in, which really speaks to the idea that this is a really big thing of mob mentality. Everyone's joining in because everyone else is doing it, so they don't really think for themselves here. Winston even says, at that moment, his secret loathing of Big Brother changed into adoration, which shows us that the 2 minutes of hate is really effective in keeping people loyal to Big Brother. All right, number 9. In Furwide, Winston frightens himself when writing down with Big Brother in his diary and how he could be guilty of thought crime. So this frightens Winston because he's not even aware that he's written down those words, so he can't even think that he's done it, so he can't stop himself from doing it. The fact that he was even thinking it is just as bad as him writing it because thought crime has been committed at that point. He doesn't need to write it down for it to become thought crime. He just has to think it. So he was thinking something against the party, and it was not something that he could hide because it's kind of hard to hide your thoughts from someone or from yourself. So that kind of freaks him out. All right, then we're going into part 2. We meet some children, and they're pretty intense. So 10's asking us to assess the role of children in Airstrip 1, which is where Winston lives, and how are children trained to support the party. Children are trained to support the party by thinking that it's all a game. They look at the processions, the songs, the chanting, the hangings, and everything like that, and they see it as some form of entertainment, so they get super into it. The party kind of turns them into spies, and we see how anxious Mrs. Parsons is around her children. So even if she's not doing anything bad, we know that her husband is like super into the party. her children just seem so eager to find someone that they can turn into be vaporized and find someone that is bad that she can be pretty paranoid around them, because any little thing that she says that might be a hint of something bad, her children are likely to turn her in. So it's not really a healthy way of living. It's not really good for the kids to do that. But again, here we are. All right, number 11, name and explain the 3 principles of INGSOC. So the first principle is newspeak, and we've talked about this quite a bit. It's the language that has become so simplified to reduce like any form of thinking, any expression, things like that. They don't have like adjectives, they don't have things like that. So instead of saying something like was wonderful, they'll say something was double plus good. So they use one root word and they just add a couple of words on top of it to give it a little bit of an extra meaning. The second principle is doublethink. This is the idea that you can hold 2 contradictory ideas in your mind at once. So with that one, look back to the 3 slogans. War is peace, freedom is, I gotta look at my shirt. Freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. Those are concepts of doublethink, because you have to hold one idea true while thinking its opposite is also true. And we'll kind of get more examples of that as we continue to read. I know that one can be a little hard to think about. And the last one is mutability of the past. So he doesn't talk too much about what exactly that means, but I am hoping that some of you guys looked up what the word mutability means. It means to change or erase. So it's the idea that the party can change the past or change history to benefit their own image and to fit their agenda. All right, and our last question for this one is number 12. Explain Winston's comment, thought crime does not entail death, thought crime is death. What does he mean by this? He means that even thinking anything against the party would result in his death, so he might as well see himself as a dead man now. Anything he does going forward after this thought crime has been committed is pointless, because he's saying that once he is vaporized or once he's gone, like, there's nothing behind that he can leave for anyone. So that one's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but we'll see it kind of play out more as we continue to read. So that's it for the reading guide. There are just some other notes I made as I was reading that are things I would point out to you guys as we were reading together in class. So I'm just going to make note of them right now. So I'm referring to specific pages. So on page 9, we may have talked about this one a little bit. I think just one of our classes got to it. But Winston's talking about the journal. And he says, even with nothing written in it, it was a compromising possession. I want you guys to think about, why would a journal be a compromising possession for someone to have, even if it's just blank? It's kind of like Dora the Explorer. It's like, okay, give me an answer. Yes. I'm hoping you guys said that a journal allows someone to write or express their thoughts or feelings, which is something that the society or the government wants to prohibit their citizens from doing. It's also interesting, after this passage, it says, nothing was illegal, for there are no longer any laws. Think about that. That might seem like doublethink that we have to do here, because right after that he says what it could be punishable by, which indicates that there is a law and that there are consequences. It's another paradox kind of similar to the party slogans. Page 10, it mentions a speak right. Just kind of put that in the back of your head as to what a speak right is. It's similar to how people use Siri or voice-to-text software to speak and then have it translated and written down for them without them having to write it. On page 12, I find it interesting that he mentions novel writing machines. This is what the dark-haired girl does. So it's just a few little words, but if you really think about it, it's telling us that people don't write stories anymore, since they can't think for themselves and they can't think creatively. So the government even controls and censors the type of books that people read by having machines write them. On page 18, when we're looking at the end of the 2-minute hate, we see the people chanting B, 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 B for Big Brother. And Winston calls it an act of self-hypnosis, meaning that the people chant this and unknowingly keep themselves from thinking on their own. So they're kind of like hypnotizing themselves to believe so strongly in Big Brother. He calls it and I love this, deliberate drowning of consciousness. It's so good. All right, page 20, we get introduced to the concept of vaporized. So when someone commits a crime, like a terrible crime against the party, one form of punishment that they can receive is to be vaporized. This means that they are completely wiped from existence as if they had never existed before. So I don't know if it literally means that they become like vapor or something like that, but essentially their existence is just erased. Think about why that punishment could be considered worse than death. I don't have an answer for that, but I want you guys to think about it. Maybe we can talk about it when we get back, or you can write them in your comments on Edmodo. On page 20, just another note, we also see the citizens use the word comrade to refer to one another. Does anyone think of Animal Farm when they read that? I do. So think about, what's the purpose of using the word comrade? Keep in mind that we are in a very militaristic society here in 1984. It's also used to make everyone feel as they are equal. If you guys think back to Animal Farm, did that really mean that they were equal? No. All right, so to make them just give that illusion of equality without really having anything there. All right, last couple notes on page 22. We're looking at Winston's neighbor and colleague, Mr. Parsons. Winston calls him unintelligent, unquestioning, and he says that he's one of the people that the stability of the party depended. So this is a common thing that we see with dictatorships and authoritarian governments. They depend on keeping the population uneducated and blind in order to maintain their loyalty. Because if you have an uneducated population, it means that the smarter people or the educated people can rise to the top and control things. So Mr. Parsons is a great example of that. And the last thing to note for our part 1, chapters 1 through 2, is on page 24. Winston's talking to us about this dream that he had several years ago where he met this man, and the man said, "We shall meet in the place where there is no darkness." And Winston said, "You know what? I really think that was O'Brien talking to me in my dream." So this will be important in the novel later on, but think about what O'Brien may have meant by that. What place has no darkness? And I'm going to leave you guys with that question. If you watch the video all the way through to this, drop your answer to that question in the comments right here below. What place has no darkness? I don't know. All right, guys. So I'll be posting the part 1, chapter 3 answer video after it's due. That way you guys can do it. Do your best. I know some of the questions can be a little tricky, but feel free to reach out, and then I'll go over those. That way you can see if we're on the right track or if there's anything that we need to fix. But let me know if you guys have questions. I hope you're all doing so well. I know this is really weird. So if you need anything at all, whether it's just like academic support, emotional support, if you just want to say hello, I'm here for it. Okay? Miss you guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.